could we do to empower this word of mouth, which is so human and which is universal? And if you detect the real stories, the impact also on social media is so much higher. It's just incredible. The only thing that we see at this moment is that often C-level is not yet convinced, or they don't know how to start with it.
Welcome to the Revenue Discussion Podcast. This podcast aims to inspire and educate the newest generation of revenue leaders on various subjects related to sales, marketing, revenue operations, and customer success. Every week, we invite an inspirational guest who is willing to share his or her insights, strategies, and tactics that has worked or still working for him or her. Today, we have invited Patrick De Pauw to the show. Patrick is founder and CEO of Social Cedar, a platform that helps you build your employer branding, that helps you go from employee engagement to employee advocacy. And in this episode, you guessed it, we talk about just that. Discover how you can build an employee branding strategy, but also how you can actually incentivize, motivate your people to actually proactively talk about the company, talk about what they go through, and actually motivate others to apply for your company, to be interested in what you have to sell. So if you can get interested into that, please enjoy. Welcome, Patrick, to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm fine, thank you.
Yeah, not too early in the morning for a podcast like this?
No.
All right, let's go.
Like we had our coffee, so it's okay.
Exactly. So did I. So today I'm very excited to have you on the show because, I mean, you have, I think, a very interesting vision on how sales and marketing will evolve in the future, or actually has already evolved today. And before we do that, I would like to get an introduction from you. So, who is Patrick De Pauw? What is Social Cedar? Can you explain us a little bit more about that?
All right. My name is Patrick De Pauw. I come from a completely different environment. I was always active in the airline and travel industry. But this was also the reason why I started 8.5 years ago with Social Cedar, because basically what we already did since 1996 was being very active on internet, and then afterwards, obviously, social media. Why? Because we were targeting a very broad audience, but also quite a lot of young people, meaning that we were also spending quite a lot, or even a lot of money to catch the attention. I want to fly to New York, and you want to be the first one that appears in your Google search, etc., etc.
So you paid too much.
I'm absolutely sure that we pay too much, because there's this eternal competition where everybody wants to even pay a bit more just to be on and strangely enough, people often choose the first line or the second line or third line. We all know this. The main reason why we started with Social Cedar was that basically 90% of people also in the travel industry, they said that they were choosing their travel companion thanks to word of mouth of friends and family. Okay. So basically, the assumption that I made was that the whole marketing spending went to the 10% of people that did not know us. I know that it's a bit, radical to say that, but what could we do to empower this word of mouth, which is so human and which is universal? So the first steps in Social Cedar were more steps into the environment that we knew, meaning B2C. What if we start working with the ambassadors with the idea that everybody is an influencer? You don't need to be an influencer to be an influencer, because everybody somewhere has a network, at least one.
I mean, if you say friends and family is the reason why people choose for an option and not the other, then friends and family are influencers.
Absolutely. And so that was the start of Social Cedar, but gradually we saw that companies were using Social Cedar for their internal, bridging internal and external communication, meaning employer brand. It comes to the word of employer branding, where before it was more marketing a product, now it came to marketing a business. What is my company? What is the culture of my company?
Okay.
And how can we go, how can we become different, stand out from the crowd as a
Mm-hmm.
company? But how do you do this? You could say that basically it's also marketing, but if you look at what happened when I was young and the years before, mostly the brand image was made in a cafe where people were talking and said like, "Oh, this is a really good company. You have to, you need to work at my company because they do well,
Right.
etc., etc." So that's basically very short. Sto- Obviously, there's a personal story of Patrick De Pauw, but nobody's interested about that.
No? Well, now you make me have to ask that question. What is the personal story of Patrick De Pauw?
No,
And
it's just that I was always active in the marketing, sales and marketing as a commercial director in quite a lot of international companies. But they also called me all the time the anti-marketeer because I also saw that lots of marketing mechanisms they did not work strategically, and that was my concern. There's
mm,
lots of tactical marketing, at least I'm talking about my experience, and there's very few really strategic marketing out there. It could probably changed in the meantime, but then, and so that's why I was always very um, doubtful of all these marketing things. And then the second thing,
mm-hmm,
which is typically Patrick De Pauw, is that I absolutely like authenticity. There's some things that I don't do because I think that I'm faking. If I would do this, I
mm-hmm,
always try to remain myself, also towards all our customers. Be humble, do right, but the most important thing is just be who you are as a person, but also as a company. So that's
mm-hmm.
bits where there's
Yeah,
a
yeah.
mix between.
I get that. Because to go back to the founding part, I mean the founding story of Social Cedar, you saw some developments or some strategies, tactics in marketing that were not really effective as people would hope so, and so then saw the 10-90% ratio of people actually more coming from word of mouth, family and friends. And is then the moment that you said, all right, maybe we have to develop a solution, a product, a service that will really put a lot of emphasis on that segment? And then was it because you also said uh, that initially people were doing it to market product services that they actually offer, and now they're moving more towards employer branding? But is it then always from the company side of things, or is it really from the people? Or how has that started, and how is it has it now evolved to?
Uh, at this moment, no, what we saw happening was since the times are changing dramatically. We all know that, and we all know that COVID made some changes,
Mhm,
specifically the ICT change or technology change. Let's call it like this. Much quicker. They said like we evolved in 7 years, in 2 years. Often I get this, meaning that companies in a whole they face new challenges very quickly. There's very few jobs that remain the same during the whole, career, which was the case when I was young. Um, there's companies. I think there's no company on earth that does not need any technical or IT person in their company. It's not because you're not an IT company that you don't need IT.
mhm,
Um, so that's one thing. Everything goes very quickly. The second thing is obviously there's this war for talent, which is we got. They will say we will have a bit a colder winter because of crisis, but it's going to be very temporary.
mhm,
And there's this war for talent, and there's so many organizations that are struggling even to continue their services because there's just not enough people. And the third aspect is that we also see that due to COVID and due to the environment that is changing, the engagement of people in companies is lower than before. One of the reasons, obviously, is because there's quite a lot of people that work 3 to 4 days a week at home. So there's
mhm,
less talks around the coffee corner. There's less. I feel my company. I know the culture of my company. So the company needs to do some extra effort to show that they care. And then I would say there's a fourth aspect, which is for me the I would would say the real interesting thing that is happening is that we finally see that companies really start caring about corporate social responsibility, diversity, inclusion.
Mm.
Before it was more buzzwords like, okay, we'll just put it in our, yes, we want to put some solar panels on our, but now we
Right.
see that it's starting to become more as a strategic choice. Um, Also because it has an impact on engagement and it also has an impact on people that choose, specifically also younger people. They are much more concerned and they are much more thinking before they will choose a company they
Join a
work for.
company.
So
Yeah.
all this makes that companies need to reinvent themselves almost all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what you see is happening as we speak, and it's really just as there was a turbo effect, let's call it like this, once COVID struck the entire planet,
Mm-hmm.
um, and uh, it, the other thing is it's not only the bold and the beautiful, because before employer branding, if you would look at employer branding, most of the times you got articles from Netflix, Google, etc., all the big shiny
Right.
big companies that could afford to do some employer branding. Now you see that small companies, they all start thinking of what are my values, because I really need to have my values clear. Otherwise, people will not be engaged anymore, and otherwise, I will not be able to attract people. So it could be determining for the future of my company. So this is what we saw happening in
Mm-hmm.
the last years, which is good, which is absolutely good. And if we can, and this is basically, but now I'm talking a bit philosophical, but if we can prove, and we are almost there, if we can prove that if you invest in your company and try to do the best for your people and try to do the best for your planet, I say it's philosophical,
Mm-hmm.
and you can also see immediately that it gives a return on investment, then there's no reason anymore why any company shouldn't start with doing this. And these are the things we also need from time to time to make really a dramatic change. As we all know, we need some dramatic changes on this planet if we want to survive another
Mm-hmm.
100 years.
So yeah, you have the aspect that people are sometimes looking for short terms gratification, and because of that, they don't see the urgency of putting a lot of energy, time, and effort in all the things that you mentioned.
Absolutely. Um, and this is another thing that we see, or at least that was one of my beliefs, um, is that if you have a good story, then people will talk about the story. You don't need to pay them to talk. You don't need a paid influencer to talk about a good hotel. If I'm
Mm-hmm.
going back to the original idea, if you really have an outstanding hotel and you have a good message around this what you're offering, then most probably it will create quite a lot of impact. What we did before was we paid an influencer to go to a hotel, and then they said that it was a good hotel, which is the authenticity is completely gone.
Right.
Um, and and um, and more people start to notice this, and this is good. This is for me a good sign. You start noticing like, okay, but this is not,
You
this
feel
is
when
not,
it's fake.
this is not. It's fake. It's fake. So
Mm-hmm.
we don't want this fake. We really want to have this new, this what we call authentic messages. And what we also measure in the platform is that basically everything which is authentic, right? Because we really have a sixth sense to discover, oh, this is a real story. No, this is a, I would say, public reportage, like they say in Flemish or in French. This is basically a fake story. Um, and if you detect the real stories, the impact also on social media is so much higher. It's just incredible.
Crazy. But I totally feel you. I love the thing that you said about it's having like a sixth sense, because recently we organized an event with the community. It was an event where we had a partner, a sponsor that financed the whole thing, and so of course we that partner, that sponsor, got a lot of visibility during the event. It was kind of putting them also in the spotlight, and because it was totally, I mean, financed by that partner, we could invite people entirely free. But then people ask me the question, yeah, but what's the clue? What's the thing behind it? You know? And I was like, it's just free. You can just still enjoy the event. Well, what they were looking for was really understanding the reason behind it, and it's I should have probably be authentic and real and just be fair. You know, just telling them, yeah, there will be a partner. It's a partner based paid event, so they will be there as well. Expect them, and I think. What you said there makes me rethink of that situation where you have to be authentic, you have to be real, you have to be. Don't try to hide things because people have that sixth sense. People are really asking me, tell me the. I feel I have my sixth sense. Tell me more, and I feel that sometimes you can also feel that elsewhere.
But this is what also happened before. There's, I think it's almost finished, but there was lots of companies where, for instance, internal and external communication were completely different departments.
Mm.
They were telling different stories. They sometimes even had different logos because I still recall it in the beginning of Social Theater, and I'm talking about the really very known companies.
Wow.
Um, and there was what you said. What you pretended to be as a company and what you really showed inside the company was completely different. Now, luckily, thanks to I would say the glass door, this becomes more and more difficult, which is for me a very good revolution.
Hmm.
And this is again, this is why uh, I'm absolutely convinced that um, call it employer branding is it's a strategic choice. It's something that it's from the bottom up, but it's also from up to the bottom.
100%.
If management doesn't care, well, then you really have a problem right now. I
I
think the first
think,
people that should care is management.
yeah, definitely. I think if companies would, because 99% of the people, they for example, they go and they do paid ads, and that's like the main thing that everybody does. And of course you have success stories in that, and so everybody thinks I need to do this. But I think if they would put the same time, energy, and resources into, for example, employee branding, employee advocacy, and stuff like that, damn, they're probably the 1% that does something totally different, and that will probably resonate much better because you don't have that saturated market in there.
Yeah, it's like we just said. If you it's the same. There's what we see, for instance, is I'm looking for a colleague. If you spread a message like this, the impact of a message like this is what there was a calculation done by a big company, something like 25%, 25 times, sorry, bigger
Damn,
than just creating an ad like this telecom company is looking for people. So
look at that. Yeah.
also even in the recruitment, you can spend your all your money in I don't know whatever newspapers where you say like I'm looking for talent, and then you just go around the corner to a cafe and somebody says like I'm looking for a colleague. Well, just imagine what would be the most powerful way to recruit people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so this is and the nice thing I just mentioned it in the beginning is it's what we see since we're working with companies around the globe, and this is so nice. This is absolutely universal. It's working in Indonesia. It works in South Africa. It works in America. It was in
Yeah,
Africa even so. It works everywhere.
I mean, we trust people that obviously we know, and that we listen to people that we trust. I will say it like that, and so it kind of, and I think, that works for recruitment. It also works for sales.
It also works
Um,
for sales. Yes,
but I feel
absolutely.
that company and people in general would know that, that instinctively they would also say, yeah, of course it makes sense that word of mouth works. But then, maybe an interesting question for you is then why are people not investing? What's holding them back to do and promote that employee engagement, employee advocacy?
There's lots of reasons. The first most obvious reason is that some companies didn't had a need before. We have companies that never had until recently never had any problem in finding the right people. They were completely B2B, so they didn't need to really get out there in the open field because it's a B2B company, so a bit below the radar. So they didn't feel the need, but then suddenly they do feel the need because again they need to have a different type of people that are applying for a job. Uh, the second thing is that I I always say that we've been learning to market a product. We've never learned to market a brand.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to be honest, employer brand, now that we call it employer branding, the values is not new. And there's always been companies, and companies probably always had values. But I still remember a company where I was working for, where the values were on a poster in the toilets. And that's not how it works. It's not just creating 10 slogans and saying like customers become come first. It's first of all,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
not a
but in
value because
posters
there's
everywhere. Yeah.
yeah, and there's no company that will say customers come last. So it's it doesn't make a difference. Values are
Right.
far more deeper into yeah, I wouldn't say deeper into detail, but into culture. Um, so the need to show the example is becoming bigger because people get more. And before again, when I was young, again, it was before the internet age. You couldn't compare. If somebody said like it's a very nice business, who could I call to just ask whether it's true or not? Now everything is open, meaning that whatever you say, whatever you pretend, people that are applying for a job or people that are thinking of buying a product, lots of people will go and see whether they find something on fraud or whatever that
Mm-hmm.
could happen in a company that doesn't suit their needs or they don't find it nice. So um, the only thing that we see at this moment is that often C-level is not yet convinced or they don't know how to start with it. And that's one of the main things is there's so many companies where we that come to us and they say like I'm really interested. I believe what you're doing because it's universal. But what story do I need to tell? What makes me different? Or I don't have so many things to tell, which is a bit strange because every company has so many things to tell. If you don't have any things to tell, then probably you don't have a company.
Exactly.
Um, but they didn't learn to look at it. I mean, every day there's so much happening on the work floor. These are stories. These are stories where people could potentially be interested in. If you make it authentic, people like these stories.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's also trying to find I'm talking about a content plan, but how am I going to visualize my culture?
Do you know some companies that are a great use case in terms of employer branding?
There's companies that are doing extremely well. Yes. To name them is I could name a couple of them, but I think there's some companies where we know that they already work quite some time on employer branding. Like if you talk about Belgian companies, you have a company like Colruyt, who is doing a really good job. Um, there's lots of if you go to the other side, there's onderwijs, gemeenschapsonderwijs. These are all companies that are really doing a huge effort in who are we? Why are you working with us? What are our values?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Companies like Facilicom, a very big cleaning company. These companies they do extremely well. At least that's what we see.
Yeah.
They do extremely well because it's really a strategic thing again. It's not something like we're going to try it and then we will stop or it's
Yeah, we're
just
gonna
like
do one
okay,
campaign and we're gonna
yeah,
see and
we
no.
no, it's like this is part of what we do. This is part of our communication plan. And we will not discontinue the efforts.
Because can you try to make it kind of very tangible? Like if you enter a company that has no employer branding in place at all, how would you start from a strategic point of view and then how would you cascade it down to a very operational approach?
Yeah, employee brand is something that's the first step. No, the first step would be convince. Always, the first step is always convince C-level because they need to be involved. Convince C-level that employer branding is, and that they at least already know a bit what employer branding is. That's step for the first step. The second thing is, I think you need to. if you find this important, try to get at least somebody who has a part or a full responsibility on being
Good
on that
one.
subject. Because if you want to do it and you put it just into a marketing or HR department, it could be a good solution, but
And what kind of person should it be that takes ownership on that project?
that's one of the biggest questions we get from companies, because there's typically sales, marketing, HR departments, and there's not an employer brand department. It's like, oh,
Right.
so in most of the companies, the employer branding is a responsibility of HR or communication. So this, if you have a communication department, if you don't have a
Mm-hmm.
communication department, often it's HR. They are most of the times in charge. Why? Because one of the biggest returns on investment is recruitment. So they
Mm-hmm.
are absolutely concerned, and engagement, by the way, is also a very high topic for HR, as far as I understand. Which should be logical. But then often it's in combination with marketing, because um, creating the stories is something
Right.
that at this moment I think is not really part of education of HR yet. I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure that this will come, but often they don't know how to make let's say, just a video or something like this. So ideally, there's some departments involved. Sales often is also involved, because, like you just mentioned, it can and it does create a positive impact on your sales as well. Um, that these are the first two steps you have to take,
Yeah.
and then what we have a kind of a methodology that we try to implement, where basically it's all about what would be the minimum investment. Because again, this is one of the questions lots of people ask, like, okay, I want to do this, Patrick, but do I need a full time? Do I need a full team? Who will take care of it? Okay, so we know that it's not a full time. You can make it a full time, but if you're starting, you can do it with just naming somebody who gets next to his normal responsibility, the responsibility of the employer brand. An employer brand is all about frequency, but that doesn't mean that you need to create content every day, neither. Um, the frequency is more important. So keeping up the pace is much more important than I need to have content every day. That's
Mm-hmm.
you absolutely don't need this. What we see is that with one story, we call it like this, could be a blog, could be a picture, could be a video, a week, um, you already go really far. So I would say next step is, once that we determined who is going to manage it, the next step is, um, do we have a culture? Can we create an EVP, employee value proposal,
Okay.
so that
EVP.
people, it's called EVP, so that EVP means that can can we make it clear what the values are for the company, so that it's the value that we give back to the employee. Uh, Once you've determined this, um, then it's up to, okay, we know that this is our culture, this is our values, there's some corporate social responsibility, we care about diversity, we care about inclusion, all these things. Okay, now we are going to make a storyboard. Um, and that storyboard is often, like I just said, in combination with people from marketing department.
Okay.
And again, don't overthink everything. What we see is what we just mentioned. It's a, and this is where often it goes wrong. So it's about authenticity. What also means that you, from time to time, need to be able, or you need to trust people. You need to have your trust in people, and trust in what people will say about your company. Um, if you want to manage every single thing people say about your company, then it will not work.
Mm-hmm.
The trust in your, again, like I said, the trust is the first. Secondly, don't over market it. Don't put your logo on everything, because people don't want to see banners on social media. That doesn't attract anybody. These are not publicity channels. Don't
No.
think you need a professional video to create impact. You don't need a professional video to create impact. Yes, you need a video with a good sound, okay, but you can make our videos are just with the phone, was
I
fine.
would even think that if authenticity is really the main key thing, filming with a phone would be even better than having a professional camera with professional editing, logo transition, everything.
Well,
No.
that's what we see, because we measure the impact of the different, we call them campaigns,
Yeah.
and we see that the difference between I would say, a video that you would create for publicity reasons, and a video that was just on the work floor where you just ask 4 questions like, "Hey, Dylan, why do you like to work here? What is your current profession? What's your hobby, whatever." That there's sometimes, I would say, 3 to 4 times more people looking at the authentic video than people that are looking at a somewhat, I not always want to say that it's fake, but too polished
Yeah.
videos. It's not like you don't need,
It's
social
too
seer is
professionalized.
presenting. We don't need this, and we all know that a video of 30 seconds, 35 seconds is enough. You don't need to have these very long videos on social media.
Hmm.
It doesn't work. People don't take the time to
What's
look at it.
um what's the balance that you see? I mean, and maybe that's different for company to company, but what's the balance of what the let's say the person that has ownership of the project kind of manage in terms of that is what we're going to publish out, and what people then put onto that to make it really authentic, to make it really coming from themselves.
And what is the question? What would be the?
The great balance between what comes
Yeah.
from the organization, what comes from the people themselves.
Okay. So what we see today is that, in most of the companies, it still is a bit steered. So often it is employer branding or HR that creates content, but then they start creating more and more authentic content, like we were just saying. So
Hmm.
same goes with the pictures. You don't need a picture where there's the blue sky, and people also like to see a picture where you just show what you're doing in your factory or what you're doing at your desk. People like to see this. So don't overthink it, but most of the companies is still a bit centralized. I think it's going to change. It's going to change. But what our company, or what the platform allows people to do is you add your personal comments. You add you make it personal. So you have the core of what you're distributing is somewhat centralized because you have a story to tell, and there needs to be some guidance. Otherwise, everybody is talking
Hmm.
differently, and that doesn't create an employer brand either. But then the layer on top of it should be, or is completely personalized. Yes.
All right. Because can you try to put an image on how the platform would work? Would then be a centralized, yeah,
So
from an admin point of view, where you have content that is being produced, and then the employee can plug them into their own socials and publish it from there, and adding their own
yeah,
comments and stuff like that,
it's
or
basically it's a platform that allows an admin, called it that way, to create content which is publicly available, because you're going to, so don't put anything from internet in there, because that doesn't have any sense. And then you invite your ambassadors, but that's why segmentation is very important. Invite the ambassadors that potentially are interested in the message. If you, for instance, if there's a post like, "I'm looking for ICT colleagues," don't send them to your accounting department. You can
right?
try to do this, but it's going to create not the impact is going to be very low. So you can
Hmm.
target this message is for that segment. This message is for everybody, because you can have a very nice picture or a very nice movie that you want to send to everybody. So, but it gives you the possibility to segment and target the audience that receives the message. So they receive the message, and then there's 2 layers. I receive a message. First of all, you became an ambassador, basically, and you also know why. Very important. I just forgot this, but what is the difference between, yes, but Patrick, people are already spontaneously sharing content in my company, and I hope they do. Yes, probably, but it's going to be very few people doing this, because there's no model, there's no strategy behind it. If you put it in a strategy and into a model where you invite people to become an ambassador, and you explain them why it's so important to become an ambassador, and then they get messages that are really interesting for them. Next step is that they can share it on all their social media channels. They can read it and share it. So there's always two steps. They can discover it, which is already the first step of being an ambassador. I'm
Hmm.
already interested in the content, and if I think or I feel that the content is so interesting, I can also share it on my different social media channels. And I don't have to bother about is the content right, because everything is being checked, but I can make it my own post with my own comments. And then obviously the platform for the administrator, they will see what the results are. And sometimes
Okay.
they are big and sometimes the results are low.
Yeah. Gotcha. So it's not the goal is not that all employees become ambassadors then.
In the ideal case, everybody is somewhere an ambassador, but don't expect everybody to share your messages. We're not living in the ideal world, and it's just logical
Yeah.
also. And even if you have an incentive gamification program, nobody is going to do this. They will probably do it from time to time, but that even that is not going to help. What is helping is what we've seen that really helps getting as much people on board is things like create a common goal. If we are all in this all together, we will. I don't know. We will invest in the rainforest, and we will, as a company, also contribute. Or all together in the program, we will also give the possibility to ambassadors to get LinkedIn training or whatever. But see that we're like again in a cafe where basically everybody is equal. That
Hmm.
normally should be the case. Um, that's the essential part of a program. If you create an ambassador program, try to get it in such a way that even the people, and this is where my story started in the beginning, we believe again that everybody is somewhere an influencer, whether that person has a huge network or whether that person has a small network. Okay, obviously, it's important, but do not discriminate these people. Everybody who
Right.
does this small effort is an ambassador. So, as an answer to your question, yes, basically everybody could become your ambassador. The, 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 the reality is that normally in a company with, for instance, 1,000 coworkers, you should be able to expect about 250 active contributors, ambassadors, like we call them.
Okay.
Um, so 25%, and the smaller your company is, the higher that percentage can be.
Hmm. I can see that. Now, do you see that sometimes that employees have some type? I mean, definitely you will have people that have some resistance to become an ambassador because not everyone is an ambassador. But do you then also have people that say, you know what, maybe I will make a professional account and a private account and have those two separated to not mix both together? Do you have that sometimes, or do you recommend it perhaps?
But it's already happening automatically because still most of the people are using LinkedIn as a professional network and Facebook as a less professional network and TikTok as a not professional network or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So there's already people know exactly what they do on their social media more and more. It's even people from a certain age, they're they're not going to put something on social media when they don't like it. And obviously there's some cultural changes. What we see is that, for instance, the more you go to the north, the more the different channels are used for both reasons. They mingle private and professional on LinkedIn, for instance. They
Mm-hmm.
mingle private and professional on Facebook. Where if you go to France, for instance, often Facebook is still very la famille, so family and friends, and they don't want their professional content on there. So I would say leave it up to the people. They have their own choice. We don't see really people having two accounts on one social media channel. That's not something that we see a lot.
Mm-hmm. Okay, interesting. Now, you said something earlier that kind of triggered my interest. You said that incentives and gamification will not per se help the increase of employee advocacy. And I think that was going to be actually one of my question. And now I'm kind of curious, why don't you think so? I mean, you
Oh,
said
but
the bigger goal is important, but wouldn't it help as well?
yeah, but we are not saying that gamification is no go. We also have dashboards with leaderboards, we call them. The only uh, the only thing we say is out of experience, with the 8.5 years experience that we have, is that if you only have gamification as a trigger, there's two things happening. First of all, you fool yourself because people will start sharing content even if they don't like it because they want to get this point or whatever they can win,
Hmm.
and that doesn't.
You need
There's
to
no
focus.
yeah, there's no focus and there's no learning curve. That's even the most, because from time to time companies, which is logical, companies will create content that do not create impact. It's logical. You can't always create the best, most interesting.
Hmm.
It's not a problem as long as you know it. As long as you see in the platform social media, okay, this didn't work. Okay, I need to change it. I need to change my tone of voice or whatever. So that's the first thing. We try to be a mirror of your communication. So don't sponsor the people to create a nice mirror. It's just a very thin layer, because at the end it's the public that will judge, and it's not you in your reporting to your CEO
Hmm.
that can show nice figures, but the public doesn't care. So there's no result. Second thing is that we also see that uh, gamification uh, triggers the one, two, three, four first people,
Mm.
and does not trigger the long tail of people. On the contrary, they are at the end, and they
That's
at a certain
interesting.
moment they will be discouraged and discontinue, and the result is that you are back to basics, meaning that there's a few people share content, and most of the people they don't share content. So this is also something that we saw. What we do think is that gamification as a I would say intermediate way of getting everybody excited again, or
Right.
the gamification that most of the
Or
companies
for
have,
specific campaigns, perhaps.
could be for specific campaigns. The most reasonable gamification that exists in most of the companies is that you get a bonus when, thanks to me, somebody is joining the company.
Right.
After 6 months, you get a bonus. This is also gamification. This is a very healthy gamification, because you really save money by doing this, and you empower your coworkers. Um, but okay, this is the experience that we have. There's companies that are using gamification, and we don't have anything against this, but it does create less learning curves, and you could get some people really at
Yeah.
a certain moment that are discouraged and discontinue everything.
No, I can see that. Now, I imagine with all the different users that you have on your platform, you probably have gathered a lot of data already, maybe done some kind of analysis with it. You mentioned some things like that earlier. Now, I know that we have quite a lot of social sellers also listening to the podcast. So, when it comes, for example, to LinkedIn, have you maybe seen or discovered some very interesting insights that could be very tactical and that can actually help with, having more resonation with with your audience, anything.
What we measure, obviously, is what creates the impact. I'm a company. I'm going to create an employee advocacy program, and what do I need to do to create an impact? And there we have lots of learnings, and the learnings, they are a combination of a bit everything. First of all, let's talk about the timing. What day, what hour? This is quite common, but we also measure it. You can look up for LinkedIn also what is the best timing to create a LinkedIn post. Well, that's the same. The same goes for employer branding. Try to send out, for instance, campaigns on Tuesday and on Thursday, because we know that they create much more impact. Try to send them at 10 o'clock in the morning. Don't send them at 12 o'clock, because then there's going to be a difference. Um, Take this into consideration also, because most of the companies, or lots of companies, they have a combination of blue collars and white collars, meaning that the timing of when you send out campaigns needs to be different depending on people that are in front of their computer, or people using Facebook, or people using LinkedIn. So this is also a different
Hmm.
learning curve. How much content do you need to send? Well, like I just said, you don't need to send everyday content. It's even um, the algorithms, they don't like that too much.
Hmm.
You cannot bombard your social media by content. So we see the one campaign per week. Now I'm talking about employer branding or social selling. Social selling is a bit different in the sense that salesperson obviously can handle a higher frequency than a non-sales person. That's something that we saw. But the
Okay.
social selling perspective of employer branding is even a bit wider because social theater is used by really big worldwide companies in a social selling perspective where they create a difference, a segment of commercial people, but they also create a segment of non-commercial people. The non-commercial people, the frequency will be much lower, but they can also contribute to the sales. That's why we always say everybody is a salesperson and everybody
I
is a
was
marketeer.
thinking of it and I was gonna say it to you.
Yeah, so it's obviously you have your sales force, and they have this segment where you can really go a bit
And
more
volume. Yeah.
commercial, and you can I think higher a bit the frequency, but consider the non-sales people as well. If your content is right, they will also share and they will contribute to. Next is how much video, for instance, do you need in your content? Do you need to have video all the time? No. We see that ideally, if you really build strong thought leadership, 10 videos, very short videos a year are absolutely great. That's why we have companies that decide to just have one day of video shooting, and in one day they shoot 10 videos, and they have basically the video material for a full year, where they
All
they
right.
they, they promote their thought leadership, and thought leadership obviously goes into social selling.
Yeah.
And then we have insights on what is the tone of voice, what is the picture that you need. I can go into really big details. We even have information about what are the colors that create more impact. So don't. I
All
like black
right.
and I really love black and white, but don't use black and white because it creates less impact. Um,
Okay.
the other thing we see is that the impact of um, video. We always talk about native video. What we see that the impact of native video is not as high as we think. So there's also people that don't want to see this video turning in on LinkedIn all the time. So um, again, it's a combination of frequency, how much um, video do you need, how long does this video need to be, and what kind of visuals and tone of voice do you need. And then again, the last thing, which is the most important one, Dylan, is inform your sales or non-sales people about the results. If they see the results, if you send them afterwards a small message like thanks to you, there's 5,000 people that looked at the video, be sure that next time they will most probably also share.
Yeah, love it. Yeah, because maybe um, to go somewhat deeper in that, what kind of metrics can you actually share? What kind of feedback loop can you give the employees regarding
Um,
their actions?
we have feedback loops on different levels. The different levels are obviously how many people contributed. That's the first one. Feedback loop on. We even have a feedback loop on social media savviness, because we know what the average is, and we can see it per company. And you could even say like, oh, hey, dear salespeople, it looks like we need some more knowledge in here. Would it be interesting to create a LinkedIn course? Because we see that the results on LinkedIn are lower than other companies. Well, most of the time they
Then
don't say this,
benchmarks
but
that you have, yeah.
so you have the insights on social media savviness, and then obviously the insights on. And then there's three levels. The first one is how many people came to my website thanks to the effort of myself or and the team. So these insights you can have. You could
Can you
even
point
say
it to a specific person?
yes, yes,
Really
yeah,
interesting.
yes, yes. And then I would say it's more generic metrics, but you can talk about what are the number of views that you created. Views is still something different. That's the number of times your message has been circulating on social media thanks to your effort. It's more a vanity matrix because specifically in social selling, I think what social selling absolutely wants is to attract as many people to your website so that there's something happening like a request or signing into the newspaper or attending an event or whatever. And then
Right.
the last one, because we also have a conversion tracker, if you implemented a conversion tracker, you could even start looking at conversions. So then you really talk business. You say like, oh, Dylan, thanks to you sharing the message, there's 5 people attending the show. Great. So you can really go very deep. Um, just one side remark on this. This depends also a bit on uh, the interpretation of GDPR, because we are obviously GDPR compliant. We do not measure anything personal from
Mm-hmm.
any ambassador. But there are some companies where the GDPR rules are more strict
Okay.
because they call it GDPR global, but it's not so global as we think. Some companies are much more strict than other ones. So
Oh yeah, okay. But you still can see probably how many views, how many clicks you get
yes,
from a post
yes, yes,
from a specific post,
yes,
linked to a person, linked
absolutely.
to.
You can,
Very, very cool.
yeah.
Do you then, and that's maybe one of the last questions, but do you then also see, and maybe that's a last selling point of really doing the employee branding, social selling, employee advocacy. But can you see, um, or can you give like a statistic, a percentage of increase of, for example, website visitors or people applying for a job compared to before when there was none of all of that, compared to
Uh,
then when they actually had that strategy in place?
we can do that, but per company, because talking about generic, this is a really very difficult one, because
Right.
like we already mentioned, it depends on your culture, uh, how good is your internal culture. It depends on your engagement, the number of ambassadors, and then obviously about your message. Is your message good enough so that people buy into what you're saying? But we do see that it is absolutely possible. Just to name one example, it is, or a couple of examples, it's absolutely possible to have campaigns where in one campaign um, every ambassador um, creates one new person working for a company. So thanks to Dylan that shared the message, there's one person that, no, I'm talking about applying,
Applying, yeah.
because the selection procedure is not, we cannot measure that, and it's
No,
not
definitely.
up to us to. But so you can really go to, okay, we have 50 ambassadors, we have a good campaign. I'm sure that there will be 50 people applying for the job. We
Wow.
have 50 ambassadors. The message we talk about, I don't know, an event is going to be about the same. So we can, I would say, per industry and per size of company, we can go quite deep into detail. We determine, by the way, we determine KPIs. So social seeder is always, what's your goal for this year? And depending on your goal, what will be the KPIs? And KPIs is something that we can measure. So it's always based on measurement. So it could very well be saying like, what is your goal? I want to create more visitors on my website, which is a goal. If we know how many co-workers you have, we can estimate how many people will become, I was talking about this 25%, how many people will apply to become an ambassador. And then we can do a calculation saying, okay, this will get you this result, so many more visits on your website. And in 95% of the cases, we have that, the KPIs are met for that company. So
Love it. Love it. If you got triggered by what Patrick said, you will have to reach him. So, Patrick, first of all, thank you so much for being on the show. And if people got triggered by what you said and they want to find out more about you, about Social Cedar, where would you like to send them to?
if they're interested, they can go to our website, but they can also Patrick at socialcedar.com, because I have obviously colleagues that are lots of colleagues that are working with me, but just Patrick at socialcedar.com. They can just reach out to me. I'm still also the founder, so it's
Yeah.
not that I'm behind the wall. I'm very visible. So
No, no, no. That's a good thing.
it was, by the way, a very authentic podcast, because there was a cleaning lady that came by a couple of times.
I saw her, but yeah, man, that's definitely okay. That's part of the podcast.
Voilà.
Now I have one last question for you, and I have a pretty good idea of what the answer is going to be. But if Patrick would be a brand, what would it stand for?
I think the most important thing, I already said that so many times, but I think it's authenticity.
I knew
I
it.
can only say this: just be yourself, as a brand as well. Just be yourself.
Mhm.
Don't polish yourself too much. More and more people don't like the polished way. Same goes for sales. Just be
Yeah.
yourself.
No, definitely. I'll take that as an answer. Patrick, thank you so much for coming on the show
Thank you
and wish
much.
you
Thank you very
nothing but the
much,
luck.
Dylan. Thank you. Bye bye.